I'm a London-based design consultancy. I'm originally from Germany, but I have studied in London and set up a design consultancy stroke studio around 20 years ago in London. That's after I graduated. And the way we work is, me and my team, we mainly are interested in sort of longevity of products. You know, I'm always calling them products with souls, so people hopefully don't want to throw them away. So, which makes it obviously also easier for us to produce them in very high quality materials, etc. And how we obviously met was with Löwe, who in my opinion produced at that time very high quality technology. And I'm very interested in that sort of like technology with soul sort of argument which is going on at the moment, because people are very concerned about techno mull or techno trash, rubbish, etc., whatever you call it. And it's a big issue at the moment.
Right. This format is meant to be that we sharing thoughts with inspiring designers. This is our main idea of this format. It would be great to to hear what are your experience regarding this interplay between sound and design.
Of course, I think any product needs to sound good. I'm not meaning it in terms of just a speaker or like from the technical point of view, but surely if you design a, let's say, wardrobe or a cabinet, you don't want the door to squeak. You actually want to have something which makes a lovely cluck noise when it falls into the lock. You know, that's always like something which obviously is a sign of quality. And I think this is a differentiation. You can almost hear a product being of good quality, which is quite strange, but it's actually also very true, because our senses are not just visual. We obviously hear, touch, feel, see, and it does make sense. You know, I think a lot of the times, and I'm sure you do as well, like in a kitchen, if a cabinet doesn't shut properly, you know, and you can hear the difference. Quite an important part of design, which I actually, before I met you and before we actually started talking about it, haven't really thought about it too much. But when you start sort of analyzing it a little bit further, it becomes quite an important, well, actually a very important part of the product. Depends on who you cater for, but especially within my client group and with my target audiences, I think those things matter. And whether it's just the sound of how the product operates, you know, being actually in use, or how a product sort of, you know, for example, if I'm talking about audio solutions for example, I'm working on an audio panel project at the moment. So materiality comes in as well. So I mean, for me, I'm a curious person. I'm a very curious designer. So if I am starting working with materials, I'd like to know what the material does and what the properties of a material are. So for example, with the acoustic panel project currently, I'm actually investigating how certain materials actually work with sound waves, you know, are they absorbing them, and do they actually look good as well, you know, and trying to understand materials from a different point. So I think there's a lot of different aspects just from the functionality sound. Then we have the actual sound absorption of a material, and how they also improve your life, you know, in terms of having a decent sound. Because I'm sure there's really annoying alarm clocks. They would annoy you if you, you know, I wouldn't buy them. And I think when we work together, especially on a little audio project with Löwe, it was really interesting how we react to, because the sound is also a guidance, you know, it gives you guidance. Like, you know, we talked about, when the battery goes low, what sound should it be? Is it an alarming noise? Is it like really gonna annoy you? Or when you switch a product on or off? And I mean, this is really fascinating for me. And that's why I think we got on quite well, because I was so intrigued about the whole idea of sound and how sound can actually convey a message, you know. And
what are your experience in terms of this topic of emotion? Are there any thoughts about this topic, sound and the combination of emotion when it comes to product? Maybe are you using sounds or music when you are designing a product?
Which occasionally, yeah, I do, yeah. You know, it's sort of like, you know, it shuts me off. It depends. I mean, I actually used an example in the past, you know, because sometimes when I have a sort of difficult project on the go, and I you know, and you're a bit lost in the process and whatever, you know, I found sometimes when I was in a theater or in a concert, because it's so, if you're in a classical concert or whatever, you know, you become, it becomes really quiet because you're in this room, which is super quiet, and you just hear the music, and much more than if you're at home, because you're still going to have the street noise or the day-to-day noise around you, and you cut off from that. And I found that a very interesting environment to click sometimes, you know, because it's super quiet. I think emotion and definitely is also something about, I think sound and haptic is quite closely linked. You know, for example, if you touch something and you stroke something, it will create a sound like an instrument almost, you know. So obviously if you touch a piece of my furniture, you probably would touch it in a different way because it's much more shapely and rounded and more dimorphic than if you have something very hard-edged. And I think shape also creates sound, or definitely materiality, you know, certain. I just done a collection of textiles, which I was quite interested as well, because I'd never done textiles before. And now they said, look, you know, why don't you do some, or why don't we do some cushions with them? And then I said, well, fine, okay. But it's quite interesting how you touch a cushion and you feel it. And all of a sudden, Max, you know, you do feel what filling is in the cushion because you hear it, you know. And I think sound is so much more, and to products, I think it's an essential part because it also tells you when something goes wrong, which is quite important, you know. Even if a door doesn't work properly, if it doesn't shut, you really can hear that, you know. So it's almost like an alarm system for a product as well.
Yeah, a really subtle alarm. So when everybody knows it, when a product is going wrong, there are these little tiny squeaks and little noises which alarms you immediately, and you are awake. And oh my God, there's something happened, and it's an unusual sound, but it's a subtle sound and a really discreet sound, but it's really alarming. And this is a really good example.
Well, you know, and obviously your podcast must change that perception. Because it is, we're looking at things in a slightly different way. And obviously sound is your job, design is my job, and obviously we analyze stuff differently. On the other hand, everybody is a sort of like sound engineer in themselves, because obviously if we are using day-to-day products, we immediately use sound to determine whether that product is still in good shape, or do we need to do something, or it tells me, oh, the water's running low in a kettle or whatever, you know, it's those sort of things. So sound is obviously essentially linked to a product because it also tells you whether it's functioning appropriately. And we probably like the sound better when it works perfectly, you know, because then it reassures us and makes us feel good, and it sort of like makes us feel at ease.
That's right. And from my perspective, there is a lot of analogies between the visual design and the audible design process when it comes to the first steps and also to the execution of a design object. You can say sound is just one part of the whole design experience. And what is for you a good or proper designed product? Are there any principles for your work or for you as a designer?
For me, a good design product is a product which has a longevity, not just in terms of longevity in functionality, but also in aesthetic point, you know, so it doesn't become out of fashion. So I don't regard my products fashionable, because I think if something's fashionable, it becomes quickly old fashioned, you know. So I think that was always one of my concepts, and I think it fits in with the current ethos of you know, which is obviously working against the throwaway culture of things, you know. And so that, I think, it's probably the current zeitgeist as well, you know. A lot of people feel that way, and a lot of design agencies do. I mean, currently we're interviewing for a internship, and we had so many applicants, it was just crazy. But I mean, it was really interesting when we interviewed them, and I was asking them, why do you apply here, somewhere else. And it seems to be really what people want to do. How can we actually, yes, we're creating the desirable things in the end of the day. However, the desirable things, which are now sort of aspirational, will trigger down to hopefully the mass industry in the future, which then takes a leaf out of the book, and that's exactly what I'm trying, hopefully will achieve. So it's a slightly different ethos here, it's a bit more calmer and thought through, perhaps. Yeah.
Nice. That sounds good. Really cool. I came back to your current project, the Absorber project, because one thought of me was that you are actually, when you designing absorbers, you actually,
it's actually called acoustic panels. Acoustic panels absorb the sounds waves.
These acoustics, you actually design the sound of a space.
Correct.
And that's a really cool sound design.
And it's very interesting because you learn so much about, like, for example, you would have the buffer material, and then you have the air area, the chambers, which then hold the sounds. You would automatically think, obviously, if it comes to sound absorption, I probably think of old egg boxes because they've been used everywhere, in studios and things. But then I get the idea of, like, okay, is it the actual shape which holds off the sound, which obviously breaks the sound waves, but you can achieve so much more just also through air chambers and so on. And then you have to think of what sort of fabrics should be used to make sure the sound can, penetrate the air chamber and then hit the buffer zones and so on. So I see every project from me is a learning curve, which is very interesting. First you say, oh my God, what's that? Acoustic panels, isn't that a bit boring? Just doing walls. And then you say, well, actually it's super important, and it's a very interesting subject, because as you say, you can change a complete space just through sound barriers and give people much more comfort in certain zones within the building or in the offices or public spaces and so on, which I think is very important, especially right now. People, years and years we've been told the way forward is, the sort of like open plan offices, and now you can see, well, actually open plan isn't as great and creative, because people might not develop that well within an open plan environment as they would if they wouldn't feel like they've been watched all the time. So it's different. In the end of the day, we're human beings and we have habits, and I think this is quite interesting. And you don't want to create a complete bubble. I think we feel more comfortable if we get a certain sound still in the air. It would be incredibly weird if there is a system which completely shuts you off from the rest of it. You would feel very lonely, let's put it that way, if it's completely silent around you and you see a lot of people, so yeah, I think it's just the amount of sound which goes through, and it's very, very interesting, because obviously we work with a engineer on this project as well. He knows everything about, like, how the acoustic and how the sound travels, and that's the thing. Yeah,
that's amazing. And how are your experience regarding color and shape and of these panels? Because I think there's a huge influence of the visual expression. The color is influencing your sound perception and the way around. Are there any?
I didn't really know that color can influence your sound, but that's really interesting. I haven't even thought of that. For me, it's more the materiality. Okay. I mean, immediately if it's, let's say, a very smooth surface, like almost like a very lacquered, like glass types of thing, you probably get you don't get sound absorption, you're just getting a bounce off probably. If you have a softer material, let's say a fabric or felt or some other materials. I'm looking into quite interesting materials as well, some sort of organic materials, and especially circular recycling is very important for me. I'm thinking of that right now as well. And so we're testing out the opportunities there. But I think the materials I'm quite drawn to are more homely, if there's such a word as homely, but to make you feel more comfy and less sterile, less industrial, which I think, unfortunately, German design is always perceived as that. You know, a lot of the German design is sort of like, it's they're very good at engineering. However, it always looks so clinical, you know, and I found that very interesting because obviously, yes, I'm German and I'm aware of that there is this. However, because I was trained in the UK, maybe I got a different aspect. I got different sort of angle on the design, and I look at it in a slightly different way. So, yeah. But tell me more about the color then, because I'm now curious about the color and sound.
There's a research study from Hugo Fastel. Hugo Fastel is a researcher from Munich. And what he found out is that color influences the perception of a noise of a vehicle. In this research, he found out that a red colored train and the sound of a train, the sound of this color of this picture was perceived louder than a green one or a white one, or the original one. So it's what was the same loudness level, but the color of the images changed, and the perception, the subjective perception of the proband were completely different. And this brings us, of course, to this topic of how important it maybe is what color you are using. For example, for this panel thing, when there's a red panel, maybe you are perceiving your space louder than it maybe is. And it's really amazing how our sense perception is influencing, because there are these cross-model interactions, and it's really
I think it's
crazy.
probably in our DNA as well, because obviously the first thing we learn is sort of like expression from faces, you know. And I think right now they've done some studies in actually corona pandemics and small children not seeing people talk. The movement, they can hear them, but they don't move, and it's quite strange, you know. And they actually saying that it might actually hinder their development, not to an extreme, but I'm sure they say, look, there could be issues, long-term issues because of that. It's very interesting, you know, because obviously sound and the movement of your mouth is very important as well, you know, because expression is so, and right now we're deprived of expression because of the mask wearing situation, you know, and obviously the sound changes as well. It's quite difficult sometimes when you're in a shop and try to order something, you know, how often do you have to repeat yourself to actually make sure, look, maybe that's as well, because they could probably quasi lip read, what do you want, you know, so therefore.
On the other side, maybe there's a tendency that the people listen more carefully, because we are trained to really listen exactly what the person in front of you is telling you. Because
I think that things definitely slowed down, which is great to a certain extent, because if you have to be slower, as you said, you know, you might have more time to listen to things, and you probably have more time to listen to music or come up with great sound effects, or you know, it's I find it, let's see what's happening. But going back to the color, because obviously that's something, you know, I was really I can almost visualize once you sort of like explained the train theory of the red train and the green train, and I thought, you probably would. Seeing a red train speeding by, you would probably go, noisy train.
Yeah, and then there's another really crazy study. I think that was the same research group, and they displayed a tree in the summer, full green, and the control picture was a tree in the winter with no leaves, and played again the train sound. Not a nature sound, a train sound.
Okay.
And the train sound in the winter were perceived as less loud than in the summer, because we are trained that the sound in winter is more subtle, is quieter than in the summer.
Wow.
So, and this deep connection of loudness perception is really amazing, and how intuitive people are responding that and activate this knowledge intuitively. Maybe an interesting influence for interior design, for product design itself. So to think about.
Well, there's certainly brands, probably for speakers, they would benefit from a red speaker now, by the sounds of what you're talking about. You know, they want the real sort of like, you know? And then there's others maybe go a bit more subtle. You know, it's more of a subtler sound. Things, absolutely. But you know, I think, yeah, it's very interesting. So.
Yeah. And the expectation you have when you see something, if it's a product or also when you are using a digital product, an app or something like that, there are also expectation, and you have a kind of a audible image inside yourself. So when you see a class or a computer, this was also one approach of our Löwe project that we thought about how this product should sound like. Of course, we should take into account the material and make it as intuitive as possible. And
and also the size, because obviously I think in one way you're saying a very small speaker should sounding fantastically powerful. It's almost like a contradiction in itself. However, you know, it's obviously that's the selling point, and you do, but that's then the surprise factor. I suppose that's the surprise you want. You want the sound of the product to be great when you play music. However, on the functionality sound side of things, you expect a small product to be much more subtle. And you know,
yeah.
Then if you turn on a, let's say, you know exactly what you get when you probably start a very big motorcycle like a Harley Davidson or something, you know, and so you know what you get, and that's sort of almost like generic what you expect from that product, you know, and that's probably something you're touching on with the small petite little speaker, you know, which doesn't need to roll. It needs to sort of like be functional. It needs to be perhaps a little bit more subtle and elegant. You know, that's probably what I'm thinking. Yeah. And then you switch on the volume, and it makes you even happier because it works well. You know, that's absolutely
cool.
Fantastic.
Great, Bodo. I think we had a lot of great thoughts about design and sound and design, and I think we can take this as a takeaway for our design process, and hopefully we inspire some designers out there to think about sound, and also to bring sound designers to think about visual design, because it's
absolutely, because I think one works hand in hand, you know, not obviously, but obviously just for our sort of like project together, you know, it started a process which is obviously very, very interesting, you know, from a design point of view, and you start looking at things differently. And especially for me, as I explained to you before, I mean, obviously you want the product to be admired in all aspects. So that's the visual, that's the haptic, and then that's the sound as well, you know, all comes together to create a very, very good product. And, you know, so it needs people like you with that knowledge of sound, you know, to bring it all together.
Yeah, and designers like you who are aware of this potential of this great combination.
Yeah. No, I mean, as I said, you know, I really enjoyed working with you on this project, and it was really eye-opener, so to speak, you know, and ear-opener.
Ear-opener.
Cool.
Ear-opener.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Well, so great. Looking forward.
Thank you very, very much, Bodo.
Okay. Thank you. Take care.